Nobody in Pine Hollow had heard 12-year-old Lily Harper speak a single word in 6 years. After a tragic accident took her parents, the young girl stopped talking completely. Doctors called it trauma-induced mutism. Therapists tried for years to help. Nothing worked. The only living creature Lily seemed willing to communicate with was Ranger, a retired police K9 German Shepherd who belonged to her grandfather. Wherever Lily went, Ranger followed. Wherever Ranger went, Lily wasn't far behind. Then, one freezing autumn night in the Appalachian Mountains, Ranger suddenly disappeared into the darkness. By sunrise, the exhausted dog would arrive at a sheriff's station nearly 15 miles away, covered in mud and bleeding from his paws. He carried no note. He made no sound. Yet the moment deputies saw his desperate behavior, they realized he was trying to tell them something. What they discovered deep in the mountains would save a man's life and change Lily's forever. Pine Hollow sat hidden among the rolling mountains of Appalachia, tucked deep within a region where narrow roads twisted through forests older than most towns in America. Life moved slowly there. People knew one another by name. Doors remained unlocked. News traveled quickly. Everyone knew Lily Harper. Everyone knew her story. 6 years earlier, when Lily was only 6 years old, her parents died in a highway accident during a winter storm. Lily survived. Physically, she recovered. Emotionally, something inside her changed forever. From the day she left the hospital, she stopped speaking. At first, doctors assumed the silence would pass. It didn't. Months became years. Therapists worked patiently. Specialists traveled from larger cities. Nothing helped. Lily understood language perfectly. She could read, write, laugh, smile, and communicate through gestures. She simply never spoke. Eventually, her grandfather, Thomas Harper, became her legal guardian. Thomas was 69 years old, a retired coal miner who lived in a modest cabin high in the mountains overlooking Pine Hollow. Life was not easy, but the two cared deeply for one another. Then Ranger entered their lives. Ranger had spent nearly 9 years serving as a police K9 before retiring due to age. The German Shepherd arrived through a program matching retired service dogs with veterans and elderly caretakers. Thomas immediately bonded with him. So did Lily. In fact, Lily connected with Ranger in ways nobody expected. She spent hours beside him each day, reading books, walking forest trails, sitting quietly on the porch watching sunsets. Sometimes she seemed to communicate entire conversations through nothing more than eye contact and simple gestures. Ranger always understood. The dog became her protector, companion, and closest friend. If Lily wandered into the woods, Ranger accompanied her. If she felt overwhelmed around strangers, Ranger remained nearby. Many residents quietly believed the retired K9 understood Lily better than any human ever could. Then came the night everything changed. Autumn had settled across the mountains. Cold winds swept through the valleys while leaves covered the forest floor in shades of red and gold. Earlier that day, Thomas spent several hours repairing fencing near the edge of his property. Nothing unusual seemed wrong. Yet after dinner, Lily noticed something. Her grandfather looked tired, more tired than normal. She watched him rub his chest several times while sitting beside the fireplace. Thomas smiled whenever she looked concerned. He always smiled. "I'm okay, sweetheart," he said. Lily wasn't convinced. Ranger wasn't either. The old German Shepherd spent the evening watching Thomas unusually closely. Every time the older man stood up, Ranger followed him. Every time he sat down, the dog remained nearby. Around midnight, a violent storm moved into the mountains. Rain hammered the roof. Wind rattled windows. Lightning flashed across distant ridges. Lily slept lightly during storms. Sometime after 2 in the morning, she woke to a strange sound. A crash. Then silence. She immediately sat upright. Ranger was already awake. The German Shepherd stood in the hallway staring toward Thomas's bedroom. Lily hurried from her room. Her heart began racing. Thomas lay on the floor beside his bed, unconscious. A lamp had fallen during his collapse. Lily dropped to her knees beside him. Tears filled her eyes instantly. She shook his shoulder. No response. Panic surged through her. The nearest neighbor lived miles away. Cell service in the mountains was unreliable. The storm had already knocked out electricity. Lily tried the house phone. Dead. She looked at Thomas, then at Ranger. The dog seemed to understand immediately. Lily grabbed Ranger's face with both hands. Her entire body trembled. For several seconds she couldn't breathe. Then she pointed toward the front door, pointed toward Thomas, pointed toward the darkness outside. Ranger stared at her. Something passed between them. Understanding, purpose, mission. The retired K9 turned and sprinted into the storm. Lily watched from the doorway as her best friend disappeared into the rain-covered darkness. The nearest sheriff's station sat nearly 15 miles away through forests, hills, and flooded trails. No dog his age should have been able to make that journey. Yet Ranger never hesitated, because somewhere behind him, a little girl who never spoke was trusting him with the most important message of her life. Ranger plunged into the darkness without hesitation. Rain hammered the mountainside as the retired K9 raced down narrow trails he had traveled countless times with Lily and Thomas. The storm had transformed the Appalachian wilderness into a dangerous maze of mud, fallen branches, and rushing water. For a younger dog, the journey would have been difficult. For Ranger, now nearly 11 years old and long retired from police work, it should have been impossible. Yet the German shepherd ran, as if the years had vanished from his body. Back at the cabin, Lily knelt beside her grandfather and fought to keep panic from overwhelming her. Thomas's breathing was shallow. His skin felt cold. She wrapped blankets around him and remembered everything doctors had taught her during emergency preparedness classes. She checked his pulse repeatedly. She stayed beside him, and every few minutes she glanced toward the front door, hoping to see Ranger return with help. Outside, the storm showed no mercy. Ranger crossed flooded creeks, climbed slippery hillsides, and pushed through dense forest while lightning illuminated the mountains around him. More than once he stumbled. Sharp rocks cut his paws. Mud coated his fur. Still, he continued. Years of police training remained buried deep within him. Find help, complete the mission, never quit. Nearly 6 miles from the cabin, Ranger encountered his first major obstacle. A large oak tree had fallen across a narrow trail, dragging part of the hillside down with it. The path was completely blocked. The old dog paused only briefly before changing direction and cutting through thicker forest. The detour cost valuable time, but turning back was never an option. At the sheriff's station in Pine Hollow, Deputy Sarah Collins sat behind her desk, reviewing reports from the previous day. The storm had kept most people indoors. The night remained unusually quiet. Around 4:30 in the morning, she heard barking outside. At first she ignored it. Stray dogs occasionally wandered near the building. Then the barking continued. Loud, repetitive, urgent. Sarah frowned and walked toward the front entrance. The moment she opened the door, Ranger nearly collapsed at her feet. The German shepherd was soaked, exhausted, and covered in mud. Blood stained portions of his paws. Yet despite obvious exhaustion, he immediately stood and began barking again. Easy, boy. Sarah knelt beside him. The dog grabbed the sleeve of her jacket gently and pulled. Sarah froze. She had seen this behavior before. Years earlier, she worked alongside K9 units during search and rescue operations. This wasn't random. Ranger wanted her to follow him. What are you trying to tell me? The dog barked again and pulled harder. Another deputy stepped into the lobby. Whose dog is that? Sarah's eyes widened as recognition finally struck. That's Ranger. Ranger? Thomas Harper's dog. The deputy immediately understood. Everyone in Pine Hollow knew Thomas and Lily. Sarah looked back toward the dog. Where's Thomas? Ranger spun toward the door and barked again. Every instinct Sarah possessed told her something was wrong. She grabbed her radio immediately. Within minutes, 2 deputies and a volunteer EMT team prepared vehicles despite the dangerous weather. Ranger refused food, refused water, refused rest. The moment officers opened the door, he ran into the storm again. We're following him, Sarah said. The convoy moved slowly along mountain roads while Ranger guided them from ahead. Several times they lost sight of him in the rain. Each time the dog reappeared farther up the trail, waiting impatiently for them to catch up. It quickly became obvious that Ranger wasn't guessing. He knew exactly where he was going. After nearly an hour, the vehicles could go no farther. Flooded terrain blocked the final section of road. Everyone continued on foot. Ranger immediately led them into the forest. Deputy Collins struggled to believe what she was witnessing. The dog had already run nearly 15 miles through a severe mountain storm. Yet somehow he was still moving, still guiding, still refusing to quit. Then, just before sunrise, Ranger stopped. The cabin emerged through the trees ahead. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney. The lights remained dark. The dog sprinted toward the front porch and began barking furiously. Sarah reached the door first. "Thomas!" No response. She pushed the door open and rushed inside. What she found made her heart sink. Thomas Harper lay unconscious on the floor, surrounded by blankets. Beside him sat Lily. The girl looked exhausted, terrified, but she had not left his side. The moment Sarah entered, Lily looked up. Relief flooded her face. EMTs immediately moved into action. They checked Thomas's vital signs and quickly determined he had suffered a serious heart attack. Another few hours without treatment might have been fatal. "We're getting him out now," one medic said. Throughout the rescue, Ranger never moved far from Lily. The old German shepherd finally lay down near the fireplace, completely spent. His body trembled from exhaustion. Sarah knelt beside him and gently stroked his wet fur. "You did it, buddy." Ranger closed his eyes briefly. For the first time since arriving at the sheriff's station, he relaxed. The mission was complete, or so everyone thought. Then one of the EMTs discovered something unexpected inside Thomas Harper's jacket. A folded envelope. On the front, written in shaky handwriting, were 4 simple words. "For Lily, when ready." Sarah stared at the envelope. Something about it immediately felt important, and judging by the way Thomas's fingers remained tightly wrapped around it even while unconscious, the old man had been protecting it for a very long time. None of them knew it yet, but Ranger's journey through the storm had saved more than a life. It had also begun uncovering a secret Thomas Harper had carried for years, one that might finally explain why Lily stopped speaking in the first place. Thomas Harper survived the trip to the hospital, but the next 48 hours were uncertain. Doctors confirmed he had suffered a major heart attack. Had help arrived even a little later, the outcome might have been very different. For the people of Pine Hollow, the story quickly became local legend. A retired police K-9 had run 15 miles through a violent Appalachian storm to save his owner. Reporters called. Neighboring counties shared the story. Sheriff deputies praised Ranger as a hero. Yet while the town celebrated, Lily sat quietly beside her grandfather's hospital bed, waiting for him to wake up. Ranger rarely left her side. The old German shepherd slept on a blanket near the window, recovering from his ordeal. His paws were bandaged. His body ached. But whenever Lily shifted in her chair, Ranger opened one eye to make sure she was still there. On the second evening, Deputy Sarah Collins arrived, carrying the envelope discovered in Thomas's jacket. She had debated whether to bring it. Something about the handwritten words continued bothering her. "For Lily, when ready." Thomas's grip on the envelope had been so tight that paramedics almost missed it. Sarah approached the bed carefully. "The doctors say he's improving." Lily nodded. "That's good news." The girl offered a small smile before looking down again. Sarah sat beside her. "Lily, I think this belongs to you." She gently placed the envelope on the table. Lily stared at it. Her eyes immediately widened when she recognized her grandfather's handwriting. For several seconds, she simply looked at the envelope without touching it. Then Thomas unexpectedly spoke. His voice was weak but clear. "Go ahead." Lily turned instantly. Tears filled her eyes. Thomas smiled faintly from the hospital bed. "Open it." With trembling hands, Lily picked up the envelope. Inside, she found several folded pages and an old photograph. The photograph showed a younger Thomas standing beside a woman Lily had never met. Between them stood a smiling little girl around 6 years old. Lily frowned. Then she froze. The little girl was her. Slowly, she looked back at her grandfather. Thomas nodded. "Your grandmother." Lily had no memory of her. She died when Lily was very young. Thomas watched as Lily continued examining the photograph. Then she unfolded the letter. The first page began in Thomas's familiar handwriting. "If you're reading this, sweetheart, then it means something happened that finally forced me to tell you the truth." Lily glanced up. Thomas motioned for her to continue. The room grew quiet except for the steady rhythm of hospital monitors. The letter revealed a story Lily had never heard. Following the accident that killed her parents, doctors focused entirely on her physical recovery. Everyone assumed her silence resulted from trauma connected directly to the crash. That explanation made sense, at least partially. Yet according to Thomas, there was more. Several weeks after the accident, Lily began speaking again briefly. Not to doctors, not to therapists, to her grandmother. During those conversations, Lily repeatedly described something unusual. A man, a stranger she claimed, visited her hospital room late at night. Thomas initially dismissed the stories as confusion caused by medication and grief. Then Lily became terrified whenever anyone mentioned the accident. She stopped talking completely soon afterward. "I didn't understand it at the time," Thomas wrote. "But your grandmother did." Lily's heart pounded. She continued reading. Her grandmother believed Lily witnessed something during the accident that adults failed to recognize. Something important. According to notes attached to the letter, the collision that killed Lily's parents was never investigated as thoroughly as authorities claimed. Witness statements conflicted. Evidence disappeared. Certain details made little sense. Then came the final page. Thomas explained why he never shared the information earlier. For years, he convinced himself that protecting Lily meant protecting her from the past. He wanted her to heal, to grow, to live without fear. Yet as time passed, he began wondering whether silence was preventing healing rather than helping it. "If anything ever happened to me," he wrote, "I wanted you to know the truth. Your voice was never lost. It was waiting." Tears filled Lily's eyes. The room remained silent for several moments. Then Sarah noticed something tucked inside the final page, another photograph. Unlike the first one, this image showed a damaged vehicle sitting beside a mountain road. The date matched the day of the accident. Someone had circled a figure standing near the crash scene. Sarah leaned closer. "Who is that?" Thomas's expression changed immediately. Concern replaced warmth. "I don't know." The answer surprised everyone. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. Thomas slowly sat up. That photograph wasn't in the file. Silence filled the room. Thomas took the picture and examined it carefully. The color drained from his face. "I've never seen this before." Lily stared at the circled figure. Even though the image was blurry, something about it felt strangely familiar. Then Ranger stood up. The old German shepherd walked toward the photograph and stared at it intensely. His ears rose. His posture changed. Sarah immediately noticed. "What's wrong?" Ranger let out a low growl. The room fell silent again. Thomas looked from the dog to the photograph. Then realization slowly appeared in his eyes. "No," Sarah frowned. "What?" Thomas swallowed hard. "I know that jacket." Every person in the room froze. Thomas pointed toward the blurred figure near the crash scene. "I couldn't place it before." His voice grew quieter. "But I've seen that jacket." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Where?" Thomas stared at the photograph. "The week after the accident," Ranger growled again. For years, everyone believed Lily's silence began because of grief. Now it appeared the truth might be far more complicated. And somehow, the retired K9 who saved Thomas's life had just led them to the first real clue in a mystery buried for 6 years. The hospital room remained silent after Thomas Harper's words. Sarah Collins stared at the photograph while Ranger stood beside the bed, his ears raised and his attention fixed on the blurred figure near the crash scene. Thomas looked older than he had only moments earlier. The color had drained from his face. Whatever memory the photograph had awakened was not one he wanted to revisit. "Tell me exactly what you remember," Sarah said gently. Thomas took a slow breath. "The accident happened on a Friday." He looked down at the photograph. 3 days later, a man came to my house." Sarah frowned. "A man?" Thomas nodded. "I assumed he was connected to the insurance company or the investigation." He asked questions about Lily. The room suddenly felt smaller. "What kind of questions?" Sarah asked. Thomas rubbed his forehead. Whether she had spoken about the accident, whether she remembered anything unusual, whether she mentioned seeing anyone. Sarah exchanged a glance with Lily. The girl sat perfectly still. Thomas continued. "At the time, I didn't think much about it. We were grieving. Everything was chaos." He paused, but he wore that same jacket. He pointed toward the figure in the photograph. Sarah looked closer. The image was grainy, but a distinctive patch could be seen on one sleeve. It wasn't enough to identify someone, yet it was unique enough to stand out. "Did he give you a name?" Sarah asked. Thomas nodded slowly. "He said his name was Robert Hayes." Sarah immediately wrote it down. Something about the story bothered her. Accident investigations did not send unidentified visitors to question traumatized children days after a fatal crash. Not officially. Did anyone ever verify who he was? Thomas shook his head. "No." Then he looked toward Lily. After he left, things changed. Lily's eyes remained fixed on him. Thomas swallowed hard. "A few nights later, your grandmother told me Lily had nightmares. She kept waking up frightened. His voice softened. She kept saying the man was there. Sarah felt a chill. The same man? Thomas nodded. Your grandmother thought Lily remembered seeing him before the crash. Silence settled over the room. For years, everyone assumed Lily's mutism was caused solely by trauma and loss. Now another possibility emerged. What if Lily's silence began because she was afraid? Sarah turned toward the girl. Lily, do you remember any of this? The young girl lowered her eyes. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Yet something in her expression changed. A flicker of recognition. Fear. Ranger noticed it too. The German Shepherd immediately moved closer and rested his head gently against her leg. Lily placed one hand on his neck. Her breathing gradually steadied. Sarah decided not to push further. The next morning, she began reviewing old records related to the accident. What she found was troubling. Several documents were missing. Witness statements appeared incomplete. Even basic photographs from the scene were absent from official files. It wasn't enough to prove wrongdoing, but it raised questions. Then she found something else. Robert Hayes. The name appeared nowhere in the investigation. No officer. No insurance investigator. No emergency responder. Nothing. Officially, the man did not exist. By late afternoon, Sarah returned to the hospital with the information. Thomas looked deeply unsettled. I knew something felt wrong. There's more, Sarah said. She placed a printed document on the table. I ran the name through older county records. Thomas leaned forward. And? A Robert Hayes owned property about 20 miles from the crash site. Thomas froze. Owned? Sarah nodded. The property was abandoned 7 years ago. Ranger immediately lifted his head. Sarah noticed. What is it, boy? The German Shepherd stood and stared directly at the photograph again. Then he looked toward Lily. For several long seconds, neither moved. Suddenly, Lily stood up. Everyone watched in surprise. The girl rarely acted impulsively. She walked to the hospital table, grabbed a pen, and pulled a notepad toward herself. Her hand trembled as she began writing. Thomas stared. Sarah held her breath. Lily rarely wrote more than short responses around strangers. This time was different. When she finished, she pushed the paper across the table. Sarah read the words aloud. The red truck. The room fell silent. Thomas looked confused. What red truck? Lily immediately wrote again. Faster this time. More urgently. She pushed the paper forward. Sarah read the second message. The man was driving a red truck. Thomas stared at the note. His face turned pale. My God. Sarah looked up. You remember something? Thomas nodded slowly. The witness who called 911 after the crash mentioned a red pickup leaving the area. Sarah's pulse quickened. Was it investigated? Apparently not. Suddenly, pieces that had remained scattered for years began moving together. A mysterious man appearing after the accident, missing records, an abandoned property, a witness statement that went nowhere, and now Lily's memory of a red truck leaving the scene. Ranger walked over and sat beside the girl again. His eyes never left her face. Sarah realized something important. The dog wasn't merely comforting Lily. He was watching her, waiting. Almost as if he understood she was remembering something she had buried for years. Then Lily picked up the pen one final time. Her hand shook harder than before. Slowly, she wrote 3 words. When Sarah read them, every person in the room froze. It wasn't an accident. The mystery that had haunted Lily's life for 6 years had suddenly become something much bigger. And for the first time since the crash, someone was finally listening. The words sat on the paper like a thunderclap. It wasn't an accident. Deputy Sarah Collins stared at the note, while Thomas Harper slowly lowered himself back into his hospital bed. For 6 years, everyone in Pine Hollow believed the tragedy that killed Lily's parents was nothing more than a terrible mountain road accident. Now, for the first time, another possibility stood before them. Lily sat quietly beside Ranger, her hand buried in the German Shepherd's fur. The old K9 remained perfectly still, almost protective, almost watchful. Sarah looked at the young girl carefully. Lily, do you remember more? Lily hesitated. Then she nodded. Not much, but enough. Over the next several days, investigators reopened the old case. The process moved slowly. Many records had been lost or archived. Witnesses had moved away. Memories had faded. Yet new pieces began emerging. The witness who originally reported seeing a red pickup truck was located in a neighboring county. His statement from 6 years earlier had never been included in the final report. Another retired deputy remembered concerns about missing evidence photographs. A former mechanic identified the abandoned property linked to Robert Hayes as a location frequently visited by individuals involved in illegal timber operations during that period. The deeper investigators looked, the stranger the original case became. Then came the breakthrough. Hidden inside storage boxes at the county courthouse, investigators discovered several photographs never entered into the official accident file. One image clearly showed tire marks inconsistent with a normal collision. Another captured a red pickup parked farther down the road, shortly before emergency responders arrived. The truck's license plate was partially visible. It was enough. State investigators became involved. Within weeks, they identified Robert Hayes as a contractor connected to a small criminal group operating in the Appalachian region years earlier. Evidence suggested Lily's parents accidentally witnessed an illegal operation involving stolen equipment and fraudulent land transactions. They attempted to report what they saw. Hours later, their vehicle was forced off a mountain road. The crash was staged to appear accidental. The revelation shocked Pine Hollow. For years, an act of violence had been hidden beneath the appearance of tragedy. Yet perhaps the most remarkable part of the story was not the investigation itself. It was Lily. As more answers emerged, subtle changes appeared. She began sleeping better. The nightmares became less frequent. The fear that had followed her for years slowly loosened its grip. One evening, several months after Thomas returned home from the hospital, the entire town gathered at the Pine Hollow Community Center. Sheriff Collins wanted to recognize Ranger's extraordinary actions. Without the retired K-9's desperate journey through the storm, Thomas likely would not have survived. Without Thomas's survival, the letter would never have been opened. Without the letter, the truth about Lily's past might have remained buried forever. Nearly every resident attended. Thomas sat proudly in the front row with Lily beside him. Ranger wore a ceremonial collar donated by the sheriff's department. The old dog seemed slightly confused by all the attention. Sarah stepped onto the stage. "Sometimes heroes wear uniforms," she said. "Sometimes they don't." The crowd smiled. Ranger spent years serving and protecting others. When retirement came, he continued doing exactly that. Applause filled the room. Sarah invited Thomas and Lily onto the stage. The audience rose to its feet. Many people wiped away tears. Thomas placed one hand on Ranger's neck. "Good boy," he whispered. Then something unexpected happened. Sarah was still speaking when a small voice echoed through the room. "Ranger." The sound was so soft that at first nobody reacted. Then silence fell. Complete silence. Thomas froze. Sarah stopped speaking. Every person in the building turned toward the stage. Lily stared down at the German Shepherd. Tears filled her eyes. For several seconds, she seemed almost as shocked as everyone else. Then she spoke again. "Good boy." Thomas covered his mouth. The room erupted into tears almost immediately. 6 years. 6 years without a single spoken word, and the first words anyone heard were meant for Ranger. The old German Shepherd simply wagged his tail. Once, then twice, as though he had been waiting for that moment all along. Later that evening, after the celebration ended and the stars filled the Appalachian sky, Thomas and Lily sat together on the porch of their mountain cabin. Ranger rested between them. Neither felt the need to speak much. The silence was no longer painful. It was peaceful. Finally, Lily looked down at the dog. "Thank you," she whispered. Thomas felt tears forming again. Ranger lifted his head and looked at her. The old K-9 had run through a storm to save a life. He had carried a message no one else could deliver. He had helped uncover the truth about a tragedy buried for years. Most importantly, he had stayed beside a little girl until she found her voice again. Some heroes rescue people from burning buildings. Some rescue people from oceans or wilderness. Ranger rescued someone from silence. And in doing so, he changed an entire town forever. Sometimes the bravest messages are never spoken aloud. Sometimes they are carried through actions, loyalty, and love. For 6 long years, Lily Harper lived inside a silence that no doctor could fully understand. The people around her saw a little girl who could not speak. What they did not see was a child carrying fear, grief, and memories she was too frightened to share. Deep inside, her voice was never truly gone. It was waiting for the right moment, the right person. The right reason to come back. That reason arrived on 4 paws. Ranger had already spent a lifetime protecting others before he ever met Lily. As a police K-9, he searched for missing people, tracked suspects, and helped save lives. Most people would have said his service ended the day he retired. They would have been wrong. His most important mission was still ahead of him. When Thomas Harper collapsed in the middle of a mountain storm, Ranger faced a choice. He was old, tired, injured. The journey to the sheriff's station should have been beyond his abilities. Yet, he ran anyway, mile after mile through darkness, rain, mud, and exhaustion. Because somewhere behind him, a little girl needed help. Somewhere behind him, a family needed saving. And like every great working dog, Ranger understood that quitting was never an option. Thomas Harper spent years believing he was protecting Lily by shielding her from painful truths. Many grandparents and parents would have done the same. He loved her deeply. Yet the story reminds us of something important. Healing does not come from burying the truth. Healing begins when we are finally able to face it. The answers Lily needed had been hidden for years, but once they came into the light, the fear slowly lost its power. The mystery surrounding her parents' deaths could no longer control her future. Deputy Sarah Collins also reminds us why good people matter. She could have dismissed Ranger's behavior as coincidence. She could have ignored old questions and forgotten records. Instead, she listened. She followed the evidence. She cared enough to keep searching. Because of that determination, a forgotten injustice was finally uncovered. And then there was Lily. Perhaps the greatest courage in this story belongs to her. It takes strength to survive loss. It takes strength to carry pain. But it takes even greater strength to open your heart again after years of silence. Her first words were not spoken for fame, attention, or celebration. They were spoken for the friend who never stopped believing in her. A simple phrase. Good boy. 2 words that carried 6 years of trust, gratitude, and love. Perhaps that is why stories like this stay with us. They remind us that healing takes time. Sometimes a long time. They remind us that loyalty can accomplish things no amount of force ever could. They remind us that even when someone seems lost in darkness, hope may still be quietly waiting beside them. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Have you ever known a dog whose loyalty changed someone's life? Have you ever witnessed a moment when kindness helped someone find their way back from grief? We'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories about loyal dogs, family, faith, second chances, and the extraordinary ways hope appears when we need it most. May God bless you and your loved ones. Comfort those carrying heavy burdens, strengthen those searching for answers, and remind all of us that no one should face life's storms alone. And may you never forget that sometimes the most powerful voice in the room belongs to the friend who never says a word, but stays by your side until you are ready to speak again.